So, Exquisite Miniatures has been on view in the Genuine Gallery for several weeks now. People have really been enjoying that exhibition. It's, if you were here the opening weekend, then you were fortunate enough to hear Wes and Rachelle Siegrist themselves tell you about their work. I'm going to do a little bit differently, take it somewhat from their perspective, but also a little bit more about them and about the history of miniature sculpture in America. The images of 19th century miniatures are all from the collection of the Gibbs Museum of Art in Charleston. They have an extensive collection that's just wonderful, and I picked a few that relate somewhat to the property here at Brookgreen to show you. I'm not going to talk about the small sculpture that's in the exhibit. All of that is either from Brookgreen's collection or from a private collection on loan. I'm focusing just on the paintings with this particular talk. Wes and Rachelle Siegrist of Townsend, Tennessee are award-winning miniature artists who have traveled the world painting, teaching, and passing along the techniques of a unique art form. They first met in Florida in 1989 when Rachelle was Wes's student. And they were married the next year after Wes joked that he would give her art lessons if she agreed to marry him. In short, she took him up on the offer, and the couple have been heart to heart and elbow to elbow painting together at their easels ever since. The Siegrists have created their share of large format paintings, but since the mid-1990s they have focused almost exclusively on the beauty and discipline of miniature art as it's been done since before the 15th century. We just love this way of painting, says Wes, who quite literally wrote the book on miniature wildlife painting. His encyclopedic knowledge of the art form is demonstrated in Modern Masters of Miniature Art in America, and the Siegrists have co-authored The World of Nature in Miniature, as well as a compilation of their own work titled Exquisite Miniatures. And these titles are all available at their website, www.artofwildlife.com, and two of the titles are available currently in keepsakes while the exhibit is on view here. Miniature art quickly became a big part of who they are. It gets in your blood, Rachelle says, sitting among the collection of tiny rocks and shells they have collected on their travels. An aquarium of guppies, each no larger than a quarter inch in size, bubbles serenely in the corner of the room of their studio. Their delectation for the diminutive is represented everywhere. Miniature painters were first employed as portrait artists long before the invention of photography. Miniature portraits were always something for the wealthy gentry class, said Wes. Even today, it is certainly a luxury item. Miniature portrait painting was an art form born out of necessity by royals, military officers, and diplomats who wished to gaze upon the likeness of loved ones while away on their travels, which could last many months at a time. And on the left is a miniature of the Green Dragoon, Colonel Bannister Tarleton. We don't like him much in South Carolina. He was a bad guy. He was on the British side. On the right is Rebecca Bruton Mott, who was known for having given the Continental Army and the militia permission to burn her plantation house so it wouldn't fall into the hands of the British during the Revolutionary War. The portraits were pulled out in quiet moments of homesickness when weary travelers needed to see a friendly face. Artists filled the demand for pocket-sized portraiture, trading in their large brushes and wall-sized canvases for this more demure and delicate form of expression. and saw a boom that lasted more than 300 years. On the left is a miniature of Alice Flagg, the ghost. You all know who I'm talking about, don't you? Okay. And on the right is William Algernon Alston, who is buried at the Oaks Plantation. Those artists passed it along to younger painters, training them to narrow their focus to the up-close and personal. They painted full-color portraits with tiny, custom-made brushes rendered on vellum, copper, or ivory, and fitted into lockets and onto the covers of snuff boxes. The frames of these impossibly small portraits, 1 to 3 inches on average, had to be constructed by jewelers. And that is largely still the case today. And with historic miniature portraits that are considered to be jewelry, the men's frame is always more ornate because it was intended to be worn by the woman as a brooch. And the woman's portrait and the frame is always very simple because it was kept by the man and it would fit neatly into his vest pocket. By the 1700s, thousands of artists who painted in conventional scale also painted miniatures. The art form migrated from Europe and saw great popularity in the Americas as artists like Charles Peale, Jeremiah Theus, Charles Fraser, and Edward Malbone shared their work in galleries across the colonies. Throughout history, almost all artists did miniatures, according to Wes Siegrist. They're what a lot of artists call our bread and butter pieces, things that would pay our bills, not necessarily the grand things. But that was obliterated almost overnight when photography got printed on paper and went to color. In the early 1800s, miniature artists felt the shock of technological progress with the advent of the Daguerreotype, the first widely available photography made on silver-plated copper. A customer could step into a photography studio with a loved one and walk out minutes later with a sharp, lifelike image that was cheaper and less delicate than its labor-intensive predecessor. Over the next century, photography kept getting cheaper, faster, and more portable, and the sales of miniature portraiture saw a dramatic decline. These days, miniature painting has widened its scope to include more than just portraiture. It runs the gamut from landscapes to wildlife to still life, even abstracts. The Siegrist portfolios consist of all these things, with Rachelle known specialty at one time being pet portraiture. She has painted dozens of commissions of dogs, cats, horses, birds, and other family pets, all on canvases 5 by 5 inches or smaller. Commissions, however, along with appearances at art shows, have taken a very distant back seat as they've made the decision to focus on the handful of museum and gallery exhibits they participate in each year. Being at the top of a very specialized field, the Siegrists are regularly presented with a variety of opportunities to showcase their work. Several years ago, says Rachelle, we were asked by the Woolaroc Museum in Bartlesville, Oklahoma, to carry on the tradition of presidential portraits in miniature. They have a collection there of all the presidents in miniature. Wes did George W. Bush, and I did Obama and Trump. It's a standing thing now. As long as we're painting, we'll add to their collection. Their studio combines as their office and is the size of a small bedroom. Sorry, I didn't have a picture of the studio. As one might imagine, when painting canvases 5 inches or smaller, there is little need for a large studio with massive easels and space to pace back and forth. The Siegrists sit facing a large window overlooking the deck outside, where squirrels and birds make themselves at home. Most artists want sunlight behind or above them, but the Siegrists prefer the window facing them as they work, with magnifying glasses. The chance to gaze outside, they say, changes their focal length, basically giving their eyes a break. The Siegrists say the desired result of all serious miniature artists is to emulate the quality and strength of a painting and showcase all the principles that make up good art, but to do it on a much smaller scale. Light and shadow, brush strokes, texture, color, all things every artist learns in their training are certainly no less important with miniature painting. One might argue they're even more important, and it takes years to get accustomed to the tedium of working small, downsizing one's brushes and canvases. Watching the Siegrist work as they manipulate brushes the size of toothpicks, rendering the eye of an alligator or the feathers of a bird, one realizes the great patience and discipline required to do what they do. There is a settled, almost Zen-like quality to them as individuals, and it clearly reflects in the still peacefulness of their work. Miniature art fans and collectors come to our exhibits with magnifying glasses, says Wes, so even a speck of dirt is visible if it gets into the paint. Our work is probably scrutinized to a higher degree than the other paintings that might be on exhibit. Razor blades rest among their palettes and brushes and are used to scrape any imperfections from the surface of their paintings. Rachelle says a square-inch painting will take her 2 to 3 days to complete, while a larger one may take 1 to 2 weeks. Wes tends to work a bit faster. Depending on the size and complexity, the Siegrist miniature paintings sell at galleries for $600 to $2,000. Wes handles the business side of things, shouldering the financial and scheduling details, and last year began his busy tenure as executive director of the Society of Animal Artists. It's a full-time job, managing the career interests of hundreds of members worldwide. When asked if miniature painting might soon see its extinction, Wes says, over time, our popularity has definitely gone in waves, up and down, and we are certainly at one of the bottom points of this current wave. To further illustrate this point, he looks at Rachelle and smiles. And at 49 years old, Rachelle is the youngest member of the Miniature Artists of America Society, which is the world's only honor society of miniature art based in Florida. She's the kid. That's really sad to me, she says. There is no one younger who we can see to carry on after we've gone. People of the 15th century surely never imagined the miracle of instant photography, let alone the smartphone cameras of our day where images can be snapped, saved, and pulled back up in a second. A lot is changing in this fast-paced age of immediate gratification, but not everything. It's nice to know there are galleries, museums, and entire societies of people around the world honoring artists who stubbornly, quietly refuse to take the easy way. They show us that art, wildlife, and the natural world is worthy of our time and attention. And they remind us that great things do come in small packages. Sometimes it just takes a magnifying glass to find them. Exquisite Miniatures continues in the Genuine Gallery through April 26th. And if you haven't seen it yet, please do. It's a real treat for the eyes. You're going to be amazed at what you're looking at. It's difficult to believe that those are actually painted watercolors. They are not prints. So if we can have the lights up, I'll try to answer your questions. Yes?
Has this career adversely affected their eyesight?
They say not greatly. I'm sure that over time there will be some differences, but they're very careful about how long they paint, the time length of each sitting, and obviously when they can't see well they stop because they don't want to produce an inferior product. Yes?
Yes, I was wondering, it's must be super difficult, and how would they go about if you know the technique of correcting any faults or mistakes without messing up the whole works?
Yeah, they have to be extremely precise, which is not an easy thing to do in watercolor. That's why the first time I saw their work in life, I just couldn't believe what I was looking at. I said, surely, you know, these are some high quality giclées or some type of print, because they are so precise. And I showed, in particular, really demonstrates just how good they are. This painting, which is in the exhibit, is 2.5 by 3.5 inches. I mean, when you look at it, it seems it could be 5 feet by 10 feet. You know, it's amazing how detailed it is, how they've utilized light in the painting, the rendering of the Spanish moss. It's amazing. They are just the best at what they do, is the only way I can answer it. And they've been doing this for a long time. Yeah. Yes?
Are they painting from something they're actually seeing, or a photograph, or, you know, still?
All of the above. Yeah. They, there are animals wild animals around their home in Tennessee that have become not exactly tame, but the animals apparently feel comfortable in their yard, and so they work directly from those animals, you know, modeling from life, as it were. They also use photographs. They would have to, especially with animals. And you might have noticed that, you know, a lot of these scenes are not of Tennessee necessarily. They're more low-country South Carolina, in fact. They show every year at the Southeastern Wildlife Exposition in Charleston, which just occurred in mid-February. I think it was the 13th, 14th, 15th, 16th, something in that time frame. So they spend time here, and they do paint while they're here, as well as take photographs. When they were here at Brookgreen for the exhibit opening at the end of January, they stayed for 2 extra days and just photographed everything. Sculpture, animals, landscape settings, exhibits in the zoo, and they've already produced paintings from that. In fact, some of the paintings that they showed in Charleston at the Southeastern Wildlife Exposition were Brookgreen otters and black-crowned night herons in our aviary. So, yeah, they utilize the world around them, certainly, as would any artist, and even plein air artists have to work in the studio from time to time. Yes, sir.
Why did they choose to use watercolor?
I'm not entirely sure about that. Yeah, I think I would have chosen something a little more forgiving. I know in Rachelle's case that she likes the softness that can be rendered with watercolor in the painting. And in fact, a lot of her paintings, this one is by Wes, but a lot of her paintings are somewhat backlit. You know, the light comes from behind the subject and softens it. We'd have to ask them that question. Sorry, I didn't. Any other questions about anything?
Can you describe the brushes that they use, the paintbrushes?
Well, there is actually an example of a brush in the exhibit. They, have very few hairs in them. And sometimes they use other things like Q-tips and toothpicks and other utensils at hand. I think that there are brushes that can be purchased specifically for painting miniatures. Most of them are European and probably very expensive. But that's all I know about it. Most of the paintings in this exhibit are 2.5 by 3.5. Yeah. Yes?
Do you know if they're still getting permission for any little portraitures or anything like that?
Yes, they are. It depends on what it is and how much time they have to do it. But you can get in touch with them through their website.
Do they mount them on something, or do you have to find someone who can make a casing, like the way they used to do, if you were to do like an antique brooch type thing or something like that?
Oh, no, they don't do that. All of their work is framed. Yeah. They do make their own frames. Yeah. Yes.
What was their profession, or was this their main profession? Or
He was an illustrator and graphic designer initially.
I missed the beginning, so.
And then became interested in this aspect of painting and really became the expert painter in America of miniature art. And as I said earlier, he met Rachelle when she became his student. In fact, he joked, he told the story when he was here, when the exhibit opened, that her mother called him to ask if she could be in this class that he was teaching at a museum in Florida. And Rachelle is from Florida. And he thought, a child, you know, mother calling, it has to be a child. And then he said, this, how did he put it? Beautiful, marriable woman showed up. and the rest was history. So she didn't start out with art in another field. She was interested in painting and in that type of painting in particular. So she's always done that, although both of them have painted larger paintings too. They're not always just small, you know, or miniature. Yeah. But today, the miniature is what they focus on. Well, if not, thank you so much for coming out. And please